address it,
Okay.
except the second half.
So want to find it by reducing health care?
Well, that's the allegation, and how can you come in?
One of the buzzwords of this year is the war on women.
Yes.
And I think about that a lot because I am a woman, and because I have 4 daughters, and because many of my dear friends are women. Most of my staff are females. I care deeply about women. And so I try to figure out what the war on women is. And after all is said and done, I have come to conclude that the war on women, and this is another tough one, because I think about this a lot. The war on women is being waged by women who I don't agree with.
Yes.
Right.
And women who think differently than the very vocal left, are marginalized. And now there is a war on women. There has been no attempt to decrease health care services for women. Every time we do something in the House, it is somehow, the student loan was a perfect example of it, it is somehow translated into a war on women. And all I can ask of you in the audience today is to, when you hear that word, to think about it. To think about whether or not there's any reality to it, or whether it's just a campaign slogan that will make you think of, or make you think that there is a war on women. But really it's a distraction or a red herring. I think it's demeaning to women that the only thing they think we care about is this one piece here. I care about jobs, I care about the economy, I care about my daughters being successful, I care about women. We attended a WISE symposium a couple weeks ago. 1,000 women were there at the On Center. Of course, you didn't see it in the Post-Standard. There were 1,000 women there who own businesses, who are trying to get a bite at that American dream. That's what I care about. And making sure that they can have access to that American dream, and the regulatory scheme, or the tax code, or all of the other things and obstacles that stand in their way aren't going to hurt them. And this notion of women's issues is offensive. These are American issues. The country is facing a debt and a deficit that will jeopardize the future of this country. Those are American issues. They're not men or women issues. And I think I find it offensive, and every time you turn around, there's another war on women. I am the first female to ever hold this seat. I came from Auburn, New York. I was one of 5 kids in a family. My parents had nothing. My father worked like a dog so that we could go to college. I am the American dream. I've had opportunities, but no one has given me those opportunities. I've worked like a dog, and my kids work like a dog, and you folks work like a dog to make a better country and give your kids a better life. That's all we want for our kids, is give them more opportunities and a better life. And so I find that first of all, you talk about war. When you see the real victims of war, and you see the devastation of war, and you see the injuries that our soldiers have sustained, to use war in that context is, I think, disingenuous. It minimizes what our men and women are doing. Especially when we talk about women's health care. I've been in health care most of my professional life. I care deeply about women having access to services, about early detection for breast cancer, for cervical screening. I care deeply about all of that. But it isn't a soundbite. And the war on women is a soundbite. And I think we've got to be real careful in an election year to distinguish between sound bites and reality.
I work at AT&T. I've been there for 30 years. Jobs have gone abroad. They've been gone. But recently our call center jobs have gone abroad: Mexico, Philippines, India. And I know my brothers and sisters at Verizon are dealing with the same issues now that we're dealing with for call centers. We're right next door to you at 250 Clinton, and now we have Verizon that's dealing with it. And my question is, what are you doing to bring back jobs to the United States? And do you support the United States Call Center Worker and Consumer Protection Bill? That would, well, it would do a few things. Because right now they operate abroad with no U.S. regulations. And it will build jobs by creating customers' right to know, ending secrecy about where the call center locations are. And so they wouldn't be able to hide where their locations are to their customers. And it would force companies that outsource abroad to return federal funding. And it gives the right for customers to be transferred back to the United States.
Is there a bill number with that?
I don't have it written, but there is.
Okay. We'll have to get that from you. Is it a new?
Yes, it's fairly new.
We'll
It's been
take a
out
look
there.
at it, and we'll get your contact information, we'll talk to you about that. The issue of businesses going overseas is a problem, and it's a real problem, as we know in
It's huge,
in upstate
humongous.
New York, how many businesses and manufacturers have left here. And so you have to say to yourself, well, why are they leaving? They're either leaving New York to go to South Carolina or Georgia or Texas, or they're going overseas. And you look at the reasons. It's difficult to do business here. It's difficult to do business in America because of what we have, the obstacles that we have put in the place of businesses, and the cost of energy, the cost of labor, the cost of the regulatory scheme. So companies just go elsewhere. Our corporate tax rate here is the highest in the world. So we really need to create an environment where we are attractive to businesses, where they want to stay here. And that's part of this pro-growth economic agenda, that we say to businesses, look, stay here. We'll help you be successful. We won't get in your way every time you want to try to grow or invest money. We're not going to regulate you to death.
Right, but you're doing that, and you're doing all that for them, and they're sending the jobs overseas. Why don't you put something on that to say you have to minimally keep 80% of your workers in America? I mean, if all of our jobs are, at the end of the day, if there's no jobs, no matter what we talk about here today, it's going to be irrelevant.
You're absolutely
You can't
right.
fix anything if we're not working.
You're absolutely right, which is why we've got to get government out of the way. These companies and these corporations are so frustrated by the cost of doing business here. What I hear from my businesses are,
AT&T made $32 billion last year. They've paid $3 billion in tax. So I don't see where they're having a problem with taxes. That's ridiculous.
but we're not talking about tax rates. We're talking about why businesses go overseas. And they go overseas because it's a business decision. It's cheaper and easier to run a company overseas.
But they're exploiting human beings in other countries. You need to regulate that. They should be minimally, if they're an American company going overseas, minimally they should be making a fair wage over in those countries, because we're exploiting human beings.
I know, but we don't have jurisdiction over in foreign countries.
You do over your American companies though, and you should put some regulations on that.
What we do is we double tax them, and when they want to bring their money back, they have to pay taxes again, which is another issue we should do away with. There really should be a repatriation and a period of time where they can bring their money back. That would create jobs. That would get people back to work. We allow them to bring that money back to this country without taxing it a second time. But I agree with your frustration. But
It's extremely frustrating when when it touches you locally, and your family and friends are just trying to save their mortgages, going to food banks, so when it'll get better. It's not gonna get better unless you bring those jobs back home. And what are you doing to do that?
Well, we're trying to get some of the regulations out of the way and trying to create an environment. We passed out of Oversight and Government Reform this past week a bill that would put a moratorium on any new regulations for 2012. The businesses over and over again say, I comply with this regulation, and then there's another one that I have to now comply with, and they can't even keep up with the regulation. And I don't mean just big business, I mean small businesses, people who hire 10 or 20 people, are farmers. Our farmers struggle with regulations more than anyone. That's one of the leading industries in this state, is our agriculture and our dairy farmers. Same thing, over and over again. This government is just trying to regulate us too much so they go somewhere where they can find an easier place to do business. I mean, and it is. You're absolutely right. All of these discussions without having jobs here is a huge issue. And we'll get the bill number from you. Thanks. What you want, Tom. But we are doing a disservice to a whole class of people. We're not giving them access to the American dream. What we're telling them is here, the best you're ever going to achieve is food stamps and welfare. And you, because your mother was a drug addict or whatever the situation was, you can't have access to the American dream. And that's not America. And we're not doing these folks a service. We're not providing them with education, good public education that makes them competitive. We're doing so many things wrong. Our policies are wrong, and they're hurting people, and they're the most well-intentioned policies. I mean, we are a kind nation. All of these programs that we set up, you know, we set up with the best of intentions, but the reality is they're not working. The war on poverty since the 60s, how many trillions, roll your eyes again, how many trillions of dollars have been spent, Tom? And what's the level of people at or below the federal poverty guidelines? It's the same, it's worse, it's not working. So what are we going to do to change it? Not that we're not going to take care of the poor, but we got to think about how we're going to do things differently so it's effective. So that more people, like our parents and our grandparents and hopefully our kids, will have an access to the American dream. That there's going to be something left in this country, and it's not going to be so far in debt, with close to 46% of our debt owned by foreign nations. We lose the American dream when we have a situation like we have now. So it's a tough discussion, and you and I will have this discussion and continue to have this discussion. But I think as a country we've got to figure out different ways to approach poverty, different ways to approach some of these entitlements to help people, give them a hand up rather than a hand out, which really keeps them down.